So, you want to save the world with clean energy? Make money doing it? Confused about the economic and technical realities of residential and commercial solar, batteries, heat pumps, EVs? Want the real-world scoop on new energy technologies, not manufacturer hype? Then tune in to the Weekly Energy Show, hosted by Barry Cinnamon. Insights from Barry's 40-plus years in the solar and energy industry will help you understand the future ways we'll generate and consume energy. And now, here's Barry.
Welcome to this week's Energy Show. Now, there's lots of changes going on in the utility industry. We've got investor-owned utilities like PG&E posting record profits as electric rates skyrocket. And these high rates are spurring customers to put in their own power plants, i.e. rooftop solar with batteries. And that's cheaper than buying expensive utility power. In the other parts of the country, like Texas, they have a fully deregulated market. That's where customers have the freedom to purchase electricity from a variety of essentially electricity retailers. It's much more competitive. So in these competitive markets, there's some smart energy retailers that provide additional services like solar, EV charges, smart control systems. And these services provide a great way for people to control their own energy and save money. There's the standout energy retailer in Texas is a strangely named company called Octopus Energy. They combine new technologies with data services, so it's kind of a software and electricity model to save money for customers. What's interesting is their parent companies in the UK, and they go even farther. They do a lot of installations, including heat pumps. And that's really interesting to me because our little company here in Silicon Valley installs heat pumps along with solar batteries and EV chargers. So Octopus Energy is a really fascinating example of combining these new technologies and business models to attack a very old-fashioned utility industry. So it's my pleasure to have Nick Chaset, CEO of Octopus Energy U.S. And Nick and I have been crossing paths for almost 20 years. I first met him when he was the chief of staff to CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission President, Michael Picker. And at the time, the CPUC was very supportive of rooftop solar. Nick then became CEO of AVA Energy, which is the Community Choice Aggregation Utilities in Alameda County. And he's a long-term clean energy enthusiast. So welcome to the show, Nick.
Thank you, Barry. Great to be here.
All right. I just kind of gave a high-level background about the aspects of Octopus Energy. Could you give everybody more insight about the parent company worldwide and also what you're doing in Texas?
Absolutely. So Octopus Energy Group is a global technology and consumer energy business. 10 years ago in the UK, Octopus has grown to be the largest supplier of electricity to consumers over there, serving about 8 million households, all with 100% renewable energy. Octopus has also developed an technology operating system for electric utilities that it has licensed to about 50% of the rest of the market. So the thesis was, when Octopus was started, the energy industry was being disrupted by renewables, by lots of connected devices that can be controlled and optimized to deliver better outcomes. This major blocker for the big incumbents was the technology stack that they were sitting on. Spaghetti soup, different solutions, all integrated together that made it very hard to do simple things like provide time of use rates to consumers or optimize when an electric vehicle might charge. We built this technology, Kraken, to solve that problem, but decided that we needed to be the first customer. And so we built Octopus Energy as the pilot of what best-in-class technology can do in the energy space. It worked really well. And the company has grown to be the largest, as I said, in the UK. And that challenger status drove a lot of the larger incumbent competitors to start questioning, gosh, if I don't change my technology, if I don't modernize how I do business, I'm going to just continue to be challenged by this challenger. And so they started licensing Kraken. And that story has repeated itself across Europe. Octopus now has the fastest growing retail businesses in Germany, in Italy, in France, in Spain, and Japan, and is also actively working with lots of the incumbents in those countries to license Kraken to help them modernize and be more customer friendly and customer centric and actually think about users as customers, not ratepayers. So in this short 10-year period, the company has grown to be 10 million plus consumers, all of 100% renewable energy, but also has built what is now the largest installer of heat pumps and solar in the UK. We're the largest leaser of electric vehicles in the UK, and bringing those energy services out to our other retail businesses as well. Because the vision is consumers want the energy transition when it helps them, when it improves their lives. Heat pumps are better, EVs are better, and when you bundle them together with electricity supply, you actually make it cheaper too. So that's been the vision. That's what we've executed on pretty amazing scale globally. And the US is the next big market that we're coming into bring these solutions to. So in Texas, which is one of the few states in the US where consumers are able to fully choose who their suppliers are, we are offering these types of solutions. And then in states where the consumers don't have that same level of choice, we're partnering with utilities to deliver Kraken to help modernize their technology stack and be more customer centric.
You know, just the possibilities of that Kraken technology, it, sounds like kind of a crazy name, but, no more than Octopus. But I just think about all the challenges of utilities connecting to half a dozen different solar and battery systems, different heat pump manufacturers, EV chargers, even thermostats. It's hard to kind of figure out how to connect all of those things. And then just controlling them is hard. But then bringing those into the utilities control capability, interfacing with what the utility wants when they want to change those things, really, really crazy. And I don't see any companies anywhere in the world, including Microsoft Home and Apple Home and everything else, that are coming close to being able to do that. So specializing with this utility perspective on just a relatively small number of these home products, it makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that could actually work here in the U.S. and especially in California. Are you guys coming to California anytime soon?
So California does not offer consumers the opportunity to actively choose from many different suppliers. In California, the form of choice we have is, outside of some very large electricity consumers, either you have your investor-owned utility, you might live in Sacramento or LA, you have your municipally owned utility, and then in about half the state, consumers can choose a community choice aggregator as an alternative to the investor-owned utility. So very limited form of choice here in California. And so because of that, Octopus doesn't really have a role to play as a direct-to-consumer electricity supplier. In California, our focus is more on how do we partner with the CCAs, the investor-owned utilities, the municipal utilities, to help them think like a retailer, think like a consumer company. And I think this is a really key point in our philosophy to energy that is different than many. We don't think of ourselves fundamentally as an energy company. We're a consumer company that happens to sell energy. And when you think about yourself as a consumer company, then you think about consumer experience, you think about customer acquisition, you think about churn in a much broader way than being an energy company that happens to sell to consumers. Too many energy companies come from a world of being monopolies. Their customer base are more ratepayers than consumers. So you don't think like a consumer company. You don't think about consumer experience. In a world we're going to where we have millions of devices, electric vehicles, solar and storage systems, thermostats, heat pumps that can be optimized to deliver lower cost to the consumer, that optimization needs to be opted into by the consumer. So for a utility in California, a CCA, they have to start thinking about things like customer acquisition costs, something, Barry, you've had to sort of live with as a solar installer. Like that's the key performance indicator, right, of a successful solar installer is like, what is my customer acquisition cost? Well, in a world where you have lots and lots of devices that can be flexed and create value for the consumer and the grid, you have to start acquiring these people and you have to give them consumer experiences that they want to participate in. And so that's what we're doing. We're bringing that consumer centricity and know-how in as a service to utilities and CCAs and municipal utilities here in California and helping them to fundamentally change and improve the way they engage with consumers who have, say, an EV.
I mean, you hit the nail on the head. A monopoly whether they're regulated or not, doesn't really care about benefiting the consumer because the consumer's stuck buying from them. That's the definition of monopoly. And, I look at the way that the utilities, IOUs, investor-owned utilities, treat customers here, really around the country. We're the ones that you have to buy the electricity from. Yeah, we might be a little sympathetic to put to print the bills in bigger print, but that's about it. Very, very few benefits there. Now, when you kind of look at that utility interface, the only other company that I can think of that's kind of doing this is a company like, there's companies that connect DERs. And I can't remember when, but they're very utility focused. They're trying to provide these services and saying to utilities, hey, we'll allow you to connect to all these devices, but you guys are really doing it from more of a consumer perspective, making it fun and easy. And, that's where you got the cartoon octopuses on your website.
Yeah, I mean, look, you think about the brand Octopus, which is our consumer-facing brand. It's really meant to be a brand that consumers can engage with and they see and they like. It's playful and fun. I think one of the fundamental dynamics you have with monopoly utilities, vertically integrated utilities, is they operate in a regulatory framework where actually engaging with the customers and being dynamic is really hard. Right. So if you say every 3 years I go out and I have a regulator that tells me that the bills have to look a certain way. If I'm a utility in California, I want to change my bill, I can't just do it. I have to go to my regulator and go through an 18-month process just to change like the font or a line item. How can you be responsive to like customer feedback if you operate in that regulatory construct? So I guess what I would say more, as much as anything, is I actually think a lot of utilities want to be more customer centric. They just can't because they operate in a regulatory framework that does not allow them to be nimble. And being nimble is so critical when you want to be a customer-centric company. So we are coming at this as both a customer-centric company, but also a tech company. And I think the incumbent providers who they've typically worked with for virtual power plants and the management of flexibility have either been one or the other, right? They're either software companies that just sell software to utilities to connect devices. And so they might do a great job of, once the device is connected, controlling them. But the hard part is not controlling the device per se. The hard part is actually convincing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of individual customers to connect their device. So you have the software vendors on one side who sell to the utilities, but don't solve the fundamental customer engagement challenge. And on the other end, you have consumer companies, rooftop solar companies who know how to engage with customers. You're talking to your customers every day, but you're not connected into that sort of technology, right? So in some sense, I'll let you comment. I won't say much on this, but like there's a real sort of competitive dynamic the utilities often have with the consumer-centric companies out there. They view them as competitors. And so that creates a challenge to sort of work closely together. We're trying to bridge the gap. We're trying to say, let us come in, let us work with you, utility, to deploy sort of a consumer-focused ethos and set of approaches on top of the Kraken technology. And at any point in time when you want to take this sort of consumer engagement over yourself, because maybe your regulator is giving you a little bit of more freedom, maybe you're feeling like I really now start to understand how do you engage with electricity consumers, we are happy to step away and let you take over the day-to-day operations of flexibility management. And that's a bit of a different approach, I'd say, than sort of the two incumbent types of providers in the space.
Yeah, I agree with you totally about the difficulties for a utility with this, 18 to 36 month regulatory process to like change the font on a bill. And that would be nice for consumers and marketing to them in a nicer way that may be constrained by regulations. But boy, when it comes down to it, the utilities are, let's just say, disparaged and not particularly loved because they're charging a lot of money for electricity. And they have total control over that. But that I understand why, that they want to charge more because it reflects better on their profits. Within Octopus, what's the bigger driver for customers? Saving money, going green, or just, having a good experience and having fun?
It's a bit of all three. Customers want their energy to be affordable. It doesn't have to be the cheapest solution out there. That's what we find. We're not the cheapest provider in the market, but they feel like they're getting a good deal. they're being treated fairly. And I think that's a big part of it. Consumers want to feel like they're being treated fairly. So whether it's a competitive market or a monopoly environment, the utilities that get the best customer satisfaction are the ones where customers feel like they're being treated fairly. Here in California, case in point is SMUD. People feel like they're getting a fair price and they're getting good customer service. And guess what? SMUD is one of the most popular utilities in the entire U.S. So it's not necessarily because you're a retailer. It's really just being treated fairly, good price, and they want green, especially in a place like California, but even in Texas where we operate, customers want green. Now, they're not necessarily willing to pay massive premiums for that, but that's an important consideration. So that's what we try to bring. We try to bring delightful customer service, great user experience, a commitment to treat you fairly, not tease and squeeze you on price where we say if the price is one thing and then it changes, the next month. Do right by our customers. And you put all those things together and you get a loyal customer base, which doesn't necessarily exist typically in energy, but it does exist in plenty of other areas. People are loyal users of Apple, not because iPhones are the cheapest phones, but it's a good product. And you're going to get consistency and, it's delightful to use. And, I think we feel like energy can be like that if you do it right.
Well, and Apple seems to have gotten its tentacles into so many things that we do. And maybe there's a UK-based company that's got a lot of tentacles too. So it makes sense for your business. How does rooftop solar and storage fit into Octopus Energy here in the U.S.?
So in Texas, we are very actively working with both installers and energy storage manufacturers to design energy products that help make the solar proposition that much more attractive. So we today have the best solar and storage rate in the state, and we're partnering with companies like Enphase and SolarEdge and their dealers and installation partners to go out there and co-market our retail electricity supply with solar and storage. So all that is to say, we really love solar and storage customers. And then once they're signed up, those batteries are networked into our virtual power plant and give us the ability during periods of really high energy prices or stress on the grid to be able to operate those batteries within the preferences that customers set, right? So some customers might say, I want to reserve 30, 40% for resiliency if the power goes out. Great. The rest of that 60% is what we have to play with for virtual power plant purposes. Here in California, it's a similar dynamic, but it's more focused on working with utilities who have hundreds of thousands of systems deployed out there that are not necessarily optimizing for the benefit of the grid to help deliver more grid value, but without impacting consumer utility. And I'll give you an example. So you install a solar and storage system on a residence in, say, Southern California, the time of use period where you get the most value for export or for self-consumption is, say, 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. Typically, that system is going to be set up to just start dumping power at 4 p.m. because that's what the beginning of the time of use period. There's no reason to wait until 5 or 6 or 7. It's just set it and forget it. But from the grid's perspective, gosh, 6, 7 p.m. is a much higher value period than 4 p.m. So shifting the battery's discharge from 4 p.m. to, say, 6 p.m. doesn't affect the value to the consumer because you're still during the high time of use period, but it's much more valuable for the grid. And so how do you engage with consumers and communicate to them that, hey, we want to change some of the basic operations of your storage system in a way that is going to have no effect on you, consumer. You bought this system with the idea that you're going to save 15, 20, 30% on your bill. We still guarantee that, but we're also going to create more benefits for the grid. And, there's a huge opportunity to do that. Hundreds of thousands of battery systems out there that are currently operating on this default mode that we think if we can move them to this more dynamic mode can be a win-win.
Generally, I've had some experiences with virtual power plants, VPPs, and I haven't really been impressed with the value to the customer. To me, I look at it, the way that the utilities are approaching this is it's a zero-sum game. And the utilities very obscure as to what the costs to the customer are. It's very easy to manipulate that for utilities to say, hey, you're going to get this VPP, you're going to get some money, don't worry about it. But I have customers pushing back and say, how come my battery gets drained by 70% every day from 4 to 6? And that's not what I was planning on. And I needed that energy to cool my home when I get home from work. And I'm even thinking about another VPP offering where the customers would get a $100 Visa gift card, but the utility would get to use that battery for 25 years, up to 35 times a year. So that's terrible from a customer's perspective. But if you can offer the customer more and make it clear what the mutual benefit is, then that zero-sum game turns out to be much more beneficial to the consumer. And I'd be happy to recommend these VPPs.
Well, I mean, it's a scale question, right? So when you design your VPP with just the sort of grid utility in mind, you will get some participants, but it'll be a small number. So you'll get a lot of battery to control, but for over a small number of customers. So the total opportunity is actually small. When you actually put consumer utility first and you say, hey, consumer, you did not install this battery with the idea that you're going to be making money from the grid as sort of the primary opportunity. You did it to save money on your electric bill and for resilience, right? Or self-consumption from your solar and resilience. And so that's the thing that, we have to sort of maintain. And as long as we can maintain that promise, there is actually a fair amount of flexibility in, say, that time of use period. And so you're not going to experience any difference in sort of your consumer utility one way or the other. And then I can get maybe less total battery per customer, but in principle, every customer with a battery should want to participate because there's no effect. It's the similar dynamic with electric vehicles, right? When someone comes home, they plug their car in at 6 o'clock. What they want is the car to be ready to go the next morning. Whether it starts charging at 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning for that matter. As long as you get that 80, 90% state of charge in the morning, that's all that matters. And so if you can create a dynamic where you say customers trust that they're going to get what they were promised, get the consumer outcome they were promised, flexibility is free within the parameters of what that sort of consumer expectation is. And that's how you get to scale. That's how you get to 60, 70, 80, 100% participation. And when you start getting those levels of saturation in virtual power plants, they become really, really meaningful.
Yeah, I agree. And it comes back to being consumer friendly to leverage that mass volume of home batteries as opposed to being, basically customer hostile, which is the way utilities generally market. So you've got the right approach and there's other companies that are starting to do that. Now, is Octopus going to get into the heat pump business here in the U.S., maybe in Texas?
It's a great question. We are not actively planning to get into the heat pump installation business anytime soon. I think we're focused first and foremost on scaling the retail side of the shop, though we are very actively looking at how we can better integrate with heat pumps that people have in their homes. So, a heat pump is essentially an air conditioner that can do heating as well, right? So it's, heating and cooling, and you have even air conditioners that are heat pump air conditioners. So we think in Texas, there's a massive opportunity because the amount of air conditioning to effectively harness that air conditioning and extract small amounts of flexibility from every given unit, but in aggregate, it gets to be a lot of flexibility value. I do think we are quite interested in ways we can partner with utilities outside of Texas that are doing large heat pump deployment initiatives to deliver an integrated customer and technology solution to make it easier, faster, and more consumer friendly to deploy heat pumps at scale.
Yeah, it's a tremendous business, and we're pretty active right now doing heat pumps here in Silicon Valley. Not planning on go beyond Silicon Valley, but it makes just a heck of a lot of sense. And especially if you've got rooftop solar, then the savings are pretty significant. What kind of financing does Octopus help customers with, particularly with regards to solar and storage and things like that? Do any on-bill financing, or is it integrated?
We don't do any on-bill financing. In the UK, it's a cash market typically. Some of that has to do with the fact that it's much lower installation costs. So, people are not paying $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 to install a solar and storage system. It's maybe $10,000, $15,000. And so people tend to finance them through sort of traditional consumer finance channels or just pay cash. It's something that we've, in the US context, are exploring from a partnerships perspective because so many systems are third-party financed here. And so if we think about marketing our very customer-friendly solar and storage electricity rates, doing so with financing companies becomes kind of a no-brainer because that becomes a major channel for how people are adopting solar.
Yeah, and that financing and the affordability kind of brings up the U word, the uncertainty word about the environment we're in right now with tariffs changing, daily, tax credit changes, pretty dramatic, even possible economic challenges, just kind of leveling up. How does that affect your viewpoint of this energy transition that we're trying to go to? Is it going to significantly slow it down, or is it going to, kind of all go away after a while?
No, I mean, look, I think let's see where we all land in the bill for some of the tax credits. Certainly the tariff uncertainty is challenging for the energy sector writ large. I think what's important to communicate is renewable energy, the energy transition is not some niche part of the energy industry. It is the energy industry. In the US, we're installing more battery, more solar than we are any other type of generation. Texas is now the fastest growing market for clean energy, not because it's clean, but because it's affordable and fast to deploy. And so I think we're having a totally wrong conversation actually. Well, we should prioritize one source of energy versus another. Clean energy is just the dominant form of energy because it's the most technologically advanced. It's sort of like saying, well, we're going to put tariffs on smartphones so that we all go back to use Nokias. It's just not going to happen. I mean, you can try, but we've sort of crossed the chasm from a energy technology standpoint.
Yeah.
So when I look at the overall investable opportunity here in the US, I think load is growing. I think demand for residential all the way up to C&I is going to be persistent. And clean energy solutions and demand flexibility are just going to be the fastest and cheapest ways to serve that load. So sentiment may be down at the moment, but I just don't see anything slowing down.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I just look at this hockey stick metaphor, and I've been doing this a long time. And when clean energy, solar and now storage, got to the point where it was significantly cheaper and faster to deploy, that's when we hit that very, very fast growth in the market. I can't see us going back, even if there are artificial barriers put in place of clean energy, solar storage, wind is still going to be cheaper. There may be a little bit of a flattening of this hockey stick curve for another 3 years, but it's just inevitably worldwide going to continue to go up really, really fast. And, that's just the wind at our backs as far as the industries that we're in.
I mean, I think the things that will probably go more slowly are the things that don't deliver consumer value, right? People keep driving electric vehicles because EVs are better to drive, lower cost to operate, and increasingly cheaper to first cost as well. If solar is cost effective in a market, people will keep buying it. If heat pumps make sense from a total cost perspective market, people will buy heat pumps. I do think that there are some use cases for some of the technologies that are not market ready. And, with the loss of incentives, there's going to be a push to efficiency, but that may not be a good thing. I think the fact is solar costs too much to install in the US. And I question whether the ITC structure is a reason for that. That, the more expensive the system, the more bigger the tax credit you get. And so in a world where you may not have tax credits forever, all right, we now have to push ourselves to become more efficient. Is it so much cheaper to install solar in Australia or even the UK, country not known for the same kind of sort of ruthless efficiency that we have in the US? Why is it so much cheaper? Well, because they've had to make it work. And, I think we, as an industry, could do more.
Yeah, it's been the story of my life for almost 25 years to try and figure out how to get those costs down. And you see how much cheaper, it is initially in Germany and then certainly in Australia. And, that tax credit's going to go away next year, and we'll have to be biting the bullet, making less money, and we're going to be buying equipment for less, even though there may be tariffs. But we'll figure out how that works out. All right, just backing up, how did you get into this energy industry? What's driving you forward?
I've been in this energy industry in California for my whole career. What got me into it initially was a trip that I took in college to Germany to visit what at the time was the world's biggest solar project, 5 megawatts. And I was just really visually compelled by the idea that you could turn the sun into energy and also create jobs. Just excited me. And so I came back and I've been at it ever since. For me, it's about delivering on the promise of more affordable solutions that are better for consumers and better for future generations. I have 2 kids. I'm also worried about what the economy is going to look like and what kinds of jobs opportunities there are going to be. And I see the energy transition and the technology that's bringing as sort of a key driver for a cleaner, better future today and for a long time to come.
Yeah, I'm the same way. It's very much a feel-good thing where I'm doing the right thing. I enjoy my job. I wake up in the morning with challenges. Sometimes there's more challenges than I'd really prefer, but I know I'm doing the right thing for future generations. And, even I got one of my kids in the business, so they're happy doing that. How can people get in touch with you and get in touch with Octopus Energy?
Well, here in the U.S., come and visit us at octopusenergy.com. And the best way to follow me and some of the things that I'm thinking about and working on is to find me on LinkedIn at Nick Chaset. Otherwise, we're going to be doing lots of stuff across the country over the coming months and years. And so hope to keep pushing the envelope and delivering these customer-centric solutions to as many people as we possibly can all over the U.S.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have on this week's Energy Show. Nick, thanks for joining me. It's fascinating to hear about the Octopus Energy story on our Energy Show this week. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. And if you missed any of today's show, you can always go to our website at energyshow.biz and listen to the podcasts.